radio. You call that radio TV?
It's an absolute honour to welcome Celeste onto the show. We're talking about I Am a Cliche, the film that you made about your mother, Poly Styrene, that most people know from X-Ray Specs. The film is incredible, and it was emotional just for me watching it, even as a complete outsider. How difficult was it to make it? I mean, I understand that the book came first. Was it just basically drawn from the book, or was there a lot of new stuff, new ground to cover on the film?
The film led on from the book, and the book was definitely the genesis of all other subsequent projects, including the film. There was also an exhibition of my mother's artwork, and it really did start from the book when I, joined forces with Zoe Howe, who co-authored Dayglow. The book is called Dayglow, the Poly Styrene story. But very shortly after we started working on the book together, Zoe introduced me to Paul Sung, who would go on to co-direct I'm a Cliche. So we started working on the film as a team, the three of us, very, very early on, back in 2017, just shortly after we'd started on the book. So really, both the book and the film really complement each other as two independent yet interlinked projects.
I know, obviously, you get some incredible guests on the film that are just talking about it. We've had a couple of the guests on the show before, like people like Martin Youth Glover, John Robb, and there's also that magic moment where Nina Cherry's saying that your mum actually made her sing. Had you heard these stories before? Was this a new part of your journey, or had you kind of sort of spoke to these people when you were making the book initially?
I mean, most of these interviews that we did, were really just revelations in terms of, how much of an influence my mother had on people's lives, the people that we spoke to. But of course, I had some understanding prior to this that, they had been influenced in some way, or that they had some kind of relationship, either directly or indirectly, with my mother or my mother's music. So that's why we approached them to be interviewed in the first place. But of course, when you have someone like Nina Cherry saying, yes, I started singing because of Poly Styrene. Yeah, that kind of information was really new, surprise, and of course, like, wonderful surprise.
Yeah, because you do hear people saying that they'll maybe list off people that have inspired them, but to actually say made me sing is quite incredible, and someone obviously of Nina Cherry's calibre as well. I've also quite enjoyed listening to like Paul's of X-Ray Specs. He seemed to be quite honest about his role, and I think that's what the film, I think, is it's a completely different to your usual run-of-the-mill documentary. There's a lot of honesty coming from Paul. That I think he said something along the lines that looking back, he feels that he was a little bit selfish. The first time that your mother got hospitalised, I think it was the first time, and it was really nice to hear someone being so honest about reflecting back, because you tend to find that documentaries tend to sort of revise history to make themselves look better, and also the honesty from yourself as well. I mean, because obviously you're full of love for your mother as well, but you don't pull any punches when you talk about sort of certain criticisms about growing up as well. I mean, how difficult was it for you to just be completely honest about your story?
I think it was difficult but important, to be honest. And I think, for me, it's integrity is really important, and honesty is a big part of that. Of course, honesty is also subjective. I am very much telling this story, or the story, my mother's story, through my eyes. Of course, we have other voices and we have other perspectives, and we have my mother's voice that runs throughout. But this is definitely, my memories of my mother and my memories of my childhood are my memories. And so, it is subjective in that sense. And there, my perspective is very dominant, but it's important to be open and it's important to be honest in order to give as accurate a picture of that period of time as possible. And so, it was, of course it's difficult. And, maybe I could have even opened up even more, but I think I struck the right balance. We struck as a team the right balance between honesty and respect, because I think sometimes documentaries and, maybe not as much with music documentaries, but sometimes with documentaries, the honesty level is ramped up to such an extent that it seems to be more designed to titillate and shock rather than, with various revelations, rather than necessarily being respectful to the subject of the film. So it was very important that we treated my mother, of course, because this is my mother, but we treated her story with respect. So I hope we managed to have that balance between honesty and respect.
100%, and it's because a lot of documentaries will just tell the story of. There seems to be two types of documentaries normally, where it is either just a story about how someone's a perfect human and unflawed, or the other side is just a documentary talking about how bad someone is as well. So it was really refreshing to see a really nice balance there. And well, you mentioned your team there. Let's give them a little shout out for the people that were working on it. I mean, how important it is. I can just imagine that. Just to have someone that you trust to give feedback to, or to get feedback from, and work on ideas together. Absolutely. So on both the book and the film front, we built over a period of years a really fantastic team. So of course, Zoe Howe co-authored Dayglow with me. She was also a writer on the film. And Paul Sung is the co-director of Poly Styrene and Cliché film. And we had a fantastic editor on the film, Zana Ward-Dixon. Editing is, I've come to appreciate, because this is my first film. I've now discovered what a crucial role the editor really plays in bringing all these elements of the film together. The editor in many ways you could say is the most important person. I mean, it's not about, competition of who's more important, but I do think the editor is indispensable. Unsung hero, if you will. Unsung hero, if you deliver the same film to a bad editor, then it's not going to be the same film at all. Exactly. And then the other unsung heroes are producers. So our producer, Rebecca Mark Lawson, again, without her, I don't know if we would have actually been able to finish the film, because, a film project is such a huge undertaking in terms of time, energy, money, and then all the stresses and challenges that will constantly come up unexpectedly, and you really need a kind of you need a calm and confident person sort of at the helm to make sure we all keep it together and reach our objectives, which we did thanks to Rebecca. The response seems to have been amazing. I seen that you got nominated for a Grierson Best Music Documentary Award. So that's brilliant. And what's the general response been? I'm assuming that because obviously I take it this film came sort of during lockdown. It's a kind of strange time to release a film, but have you been able to take it out and see audiences' reactions to it in real time? Yes. So as you said, it was a strange time. We actually finished
editing and post-production during the pandemic, during the lockdown period, which was really, really challenging. But you make it work, and it's the same with the release. We didn't intend to release the film during a lockdown where cinemas were closed, but our film distributor in the UK, Modern Films, they did a fantastic digital release across many platforms. So the response was really fantastic as a digital release. It also came out on Sky Arts as a broadcast. And so that enabled, so many people to watch the film that may have never actually gone to the cinema necessarily to watch a film like that. So I think actually in a way, probably we had the biggest audience that one can get because of the unorthodox way that it was released in a sense. And also we have kind of a captive audience, everyone at home.
Literally captive, can't leave the house.
That's it. So, in a way, it was a kind of blessing in disguise. Of course, a horrible, terrible pandemic we would not wish for this to happen. But it was, it was a silver lining, definitely. And we made it work, and our distributor made it work, and we're really fortunate. And now, of course, we've been able to take it out to audiences. We've had a limited cinema release. So we had a screening in Brixton at the Ritzy recently, which was well attended. It was a great party afterwards. And we had also a screening in Hastings, the first screening in Hastings, which of course is where my mother lived during the later part of her life. And just last week in Bexhill at the Delaware Pavilion. So we hope to do more screenings of this nature, special one-off screenings in independent cinemas, throughout the year, the rest of the year, and going into next year.
That'd be great to do that up in Glasgow or something. The CCA would be good, I think, or the GFT or something like that.
Well, we premiered at the Glasgow Film Festival earlier in the year. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I did notice that Creative Scotland get a mention as well. So were they involved with the funding of it? How did that come about?
Yes, that's right. So, very grateful to Creative Scotland, as well as BFI, British Film Institute, and Sky Arts, because with this funding, we were able to actually finish the film and get it out to audiences. And Creative Scotland, they supported us because Paul Sung, the co-director, is a Scottish-based filmmaker. He lives in Edinburgh. So yeah, that was why we were eligible for Creative Scotland funding. So yeah, very, very lucky to have their support. And it was such an honour to have the film released. Our first festival premiere was at the Glasgow Film Festival, which is a fantastic festival. It was digital again because of, the lockdown situation. It would have been lovely to actually be able to go to Glasgow, but hopefully we'll be able to do that.
Amazing. And I've got because we're supposed to do the show on, was it Sunday last week, and obviously there was a technical issue, and then I thought I wasn't going to get hold of you yesterday because the internet broke. The internet just shut down. But Ali wanted me to ask this question because she's a massive fan of your mother. It still is, obviously. She says her question is: women at the forefront of the punk era presented a very different take on what it meant to be female, inverted commas, which was way more individualistic and expressive than the girl power shite that gets bandied about these days. Poly Styrene reflected this in her songs like Identity and the opening line to Oh Bondage Up Yours. My question is, what message did her mother instill in her as a female growing up that shaped who she is today?
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably my mother instilled lots of contradictory advice, as mothers often tend to do. I talk about my mother's relationship with feminism in the film, and it was a complicated one. She didn't necessarily consider herself a feminist. And in some ways, my mother was very conservative as a mother. She didn't want me to make maybe certain mistakes that she felt she had made when she was younger. So I think she wanted me to, stay on the straight and narrow as much as I could when I was younger. But she was definitely, just as a role model, she was a very strong female role model in the sense that she did everything on her own terms. And, my mother was a force of nature as well. So a very small woman physically, 5'1", very small, but very strong, very powerful. She had such a powerful presence. And she was, she didn't take any nonsense. And she always stood up for, what was right, what she felt was right. And that was, of course, really, a fantastic, in terms of female role models, and that being my mother, I think, above and beyond, I think that's what I got from my mother in terms of womanhood, was just that she was a model of an independent woman in every sense of the word, even if she was not particularly active, in any ideological sense as a feminist, and in the sense of, she never spoke to me too much about feminism, or we never really spoke about those issues, but just in terms of how she lived her life as a woman, I think definitely, she kind of created a mold in a way for me to follow to a certain extent.
There's a good bit in the film when you're just kind of talking about, how you just wanted a normal upbringing kind of thing. You're just like, and then also you're talking about, how you've been to, I don't know if it was in the film or it was maybe an interview I watched you saying as well about how, it didn't seem, you obviously weren't a big fan of it. At what point did you realise that, this is my mother, that's pretty cool, actually. This is pretty cool what she's done.
Yeah, I think it was probably when I was a teenager, and I listened to Germ-Free Adolescence for the first time. So, I'd grown up with my mother making music, but to be honest, I was never too impressed by anything that she was doing. Again, I don't think kids tend to see their parents as being particularly cool. It doesn't matter if they're the coolest people on the planet. You'll find something uncool about them, and embarrassing about them. But when I first listened to Germ-Free Adolescence, really listened to it, I was about 15, and I was really impressed. That was the first time where I was like, oh my God, this is like, this is amazing. And probably because it spoke to me as a teenager, there is that kind of teenage energy that runs through the album. But also I think because it spoke to me in the sense of the societal themes that she was exploring. Like, the themes are incredible and incredibly relevant, so they were relevant when I was a teenager, and they're relevant for teenagers today, because they are so, they were so, what my mum was doing was so ahead of its time, as she had such incredible foresight in terms of describing future situations, future scenarios, future societies. And I think more than ever, 2021 is very much kind of in keeping with the world that she was creating in Germ-Free Adolescence, especially when we're thinking about Germ-Free Adolescence as a song, the title song of the album. And it seems to be, there's always, there's always something happening, you know, that you'll be like, oh my God, my mother predicted that in her music, whether it's, you know, genetic engineering or Germ for Adolescence or The Day the World Turned Dayglow or Warrior and Woolworths. You know, you listen to all of these songs. I'm a cliche, I'm a poser, artificial. You listen to all of these songs and you're like, there is some kind of, even if they seem quite playful on the surface, there are some kind of profound messages there that most people can relate to.
And it's incredible. It's even more incredible because she was so young when she wrote those songs as well. It's incredible. And I was actually, another thing that she kind of sort of foreseen, and then it's quite a sort of quite an important part of the film is the trip to New York, which by a few different accounts was it did change. It actually had a negative effect on her, and it just seemed to be that this was the kind of like the antithesis of the world that she had wrote about, imagined. And when she's seen that it was too real almost. Could we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so New York was, you know, it's a pivotal moment in the film. And it was a pivotal moment, I think, in my mother's career, music career. Mainly because it was such a fantastic, exciting opportunity to be one of the few UK punk bands to perform, to have a residency at CBGB's. There were very few. My mother's band was one of the first. So that was a real achievement. But then, of course, that level of achievement brought with it, you know, some less desirable events and happenings. So, you know, my mother was there. They must have been there for at least a month. And I think they just experienced a different level of fame and intensity during that New York phase. Also, New York itself was a very different city to the New York of today. It was, you know, New York was probably at its most like dark in the sense of, you know, economic problems, social difficulties, terribly high crime rate. You know, the streets were dirty. It was kind of in a crisis actually at that point. But of course, it's the United States. So my mother goes there, and a lot of the things that she'd been writing about in her lyrics, you know, in terms of the consumer society, she was really confronted with in New York for the first time. And so that, I think this kind of, you know, all these various elements combined to make the whole New York experience a turning point in her life, in her music career. And in a way, it was kind of the beginning of the end of X-Ray Specs, because I think it opened a window to a world and a lifestyle that I don't think my mother was that keen to spend too much time in. But also it was a big eye-opener in terms of the social themes that she was already exploring, but which I think just intensified in the following songs that she wrote that would appear on Germ for Adolescence when the album was released in 1978. So that would have been just shortly after they returned from New York.
Another thing that sort of stood out was the fact that there was a misdiagnosis. I also heard you saying later on though as well that you know, back in those days there wasn't as much you know, information as there was now, and it could have been a mistake, an easy mistake to make on the diagnosis. How much of a problem was the misdiagnosis, do you think? I mean, did it result in different medication, or could that have been picked up earlier, do you think?
Yeah, I think the misdiagnosis, of course, was not helpful, and especially in the sense that she was diagnosed with schizophrenia at 21 years old. You know, during the height of the X-Ray Specs success, and so when she was in the middle of touring and you know, and promoting the album, and the way that it was expressed to her. So it was not only that, you know, you have schizophrenia and this is something you're going to always have to deal with. But also it was that this is the end of your career. You can't possibly continue to do what you're doing as a schizophrenic. And so that was very, very damaging to my mother. And then, of course, she wasn't even schizophrenic. She had bipolar disorder, which is actually much more manageable. And I think if she had the correct diagnosis and, of course, medication and treatment, perhaps she would have not needed to retire so early from music, as it were, and she could have continued to perform with the correct, preventative, the correct measures to stop that experience becoming too overwhelming.
Yeah, there's a misdiagnosis is one thing. That's just horrific in its own right, but to actually be told you can't do this anymore, it's just absolutely horrific for that to happen. It's what about with yourself? I understand you went to Spain to perform. Was it to study and then you started the band? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I've only seen some videos on YouTube and you seemed amazing.
Thank you.
You haven't done it for a while though, or are you planning to go back to it? Or tell us the story of Spain and your own music career.
Yeah, so I moved to Spain in the early 2000s. After I finished university, I actually went to Spain initially to work. So I was teaching English, and in Madrid at that time, it was really fun. It is a fantastic city. It was a very exciting time. It was just before the crash, the financial crash. So it was a booming city, growing city. So it was really, really interesting what was happening there, on an artistic level. So I formed my band a couple of years after being in Madrid. Sorry, and I moved to Barcelona later. But we toured a little bit in Spain, and it was a really fun experience. I didn't really take it too seriously in the sense of, it was more of a hobby rather than a career. But, I continue to write. I'm always writing songs, again, more as a just relaxing activity. But yeah, you never know. I might do some, more recording and performing again in the future. Never say never.
Absolutely. And what was it like to actually go on the stage with your mother? And obviously, I know collaborating Generation Indigo and stuff like that. Because it looks like it would have been a lot of fun for you. To sort of bury the hatchet and then be on stage together against all the odds, because it didn't look like your mother would be back on stage, or at one point it didn't even look like you should be in talking terms again.
Absolutely, it was fantastic, a fantastic experience, and so wonderful to see my mother on stage and enjoying it. Because it had been, she had found performing live to be very stressful. Post X-ray spec. So this wasn't the first gig actually that my mother had done, sort of the first sort of reunion, let's say. She, in the early 90s, X-ray specs, they played at the Brixton Academy. And so I actually I was still at primary school at the time, and I went on stage again with my mother, alongside my cousin. This time we weren't singing, we were just actually throwing sweets to the audience. So I remember that being a wild experience. But actually being able to go on stage and sing alongside my mum, that was, again, something, once in a lifetime experience. And of course, my band that I'd formed in Madrid, we actually came over and we opened the show. We opened for my mum's band, and also Goldblade. They were the other band, John Rob's band, who played that night. So that was, again, like a phenomenal experience, because that was our first gig. Our first gig was in the Roundhouse. It was in the Roundhouse. So, first and last time we had such a big audience.
That is certainly a baptism of fire.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's been amazing speaking to you just now. We'll give a quick plug for, wrap up, give a quick plug for everything. The film, understand, is on Amazon and YouTube. You can pay-per-view, basically. I think it's like £8 or £9 for people to watch it there. Is that the easiest way to do it, or is there a better way to support the film directly?
So you can definitely purchase the film to view on Amazon, on YouTube, and if you go to modernfilms.com, that is our distributor in the UK, modernfilms.com. If you are in the UK, you can watch the film in the UK. They have various platforms where you're able to do that. And otherwise, also, if you're in the UK, you can, I think, still catch the film on Sky Arts or Now TV, if you have Now TV. So that's also free to view. It's on Freeview. If you're not in the UK, if you're in the United States, for example, the film will be released early next year, so early 2022. And that goes for, I think, North America, Canada as well, and also Australia, New Zealand. You'll be able to watch the film shortly in those territories too.
Amazing stuff. And finally, what are you working on just now? Obviously, still going to take this film out to new territories, but are you thinking of another book, another film?
Yes, I just finished actually a novelette, a small novel about modernity and dystopia, and that hopefully will be published shortly. And I'm also developing a couple of film projects. One of them is an exploration, a deeper exploration of the Hare Krishna movement that I spent, part of my childhood growing up inside this movement. And another project kind of looking at another sort of part of female history and music. So just kind of still plugging away at these other projects. Hopefully they'll come to something in the future, but they tend to take a long time.
I found that interesting as well in the Hare Krishna side of things, is that, because obviously when I just sort of read the description of it, or I think I'd seen you been in, I don't know, I just imagined that would have been one of the downsides of like being whisked off to a sort of cult-like existence, and I was quite surprised to see that it was actually harder for you to go back to sort of normality, because it seemed like quite an idyllic for a child anyway.
Definitely. I mean, and that's the funny thing about it, is that I think people will think about a new religious movement or a cult, let's say a cult, and you'll have all kinds of preconceived ideas of what that might be like. But then we don't think about how weird, the normal world that we live in is if you're coming from that other world. It's all often it's all relative, isn't it?
And it's quite good as well, because John Robb was saying that at that time that your mother he seemed to think that she was doing really well. It seemed to be perfect for her. And then there was other people going, no, she wasn't so well down there as well. And that was another good thing with the documentary, just hearing people with their just different perception of events as it was happening. And that's what makes it so really interesting. And I would like to talk about the other stuff, but I don't want to give away too much of the film. People go and watch the film. No more spoilers here. It's an amazing film. Check it out. And thank you so much for joining us on You Call That Radio today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and good luck in all the projects.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, enough respect in the respect to the man like Mark. I love what the man talk on the radio. In case you never know. You call that radio, call that the radio. You call that radio, call that the radio. Come and say, in my name, I'll just go with the flow. In my name, I'll just go with the flow. Till you Mr. Mark, now go bend down low. Till you Mr. Mark, now go bend down low. Boom. Lot of mercy. Yo. You call that radio. You call that radio. Come and say, don't you be a another man, I'll go lose your head. Say don't you be another, me say and lose the head. Me say radio, radio, call that a radio, radio, straight from out of Glasgow, Glasgow.